This is a different club. I've been all around the world. I've never seen a club like this anywhere in the world.
Once you play for the club, very few people leave it.
We've been here for 70 years. On only 5 of those years have the first grade missed the finals.
We've been through good times and bad times and better times.
You just don't realise how big a network it is.
Being part of Royals, a lot of us have to go to work. We have to be part of certain things. We have to go to school, we have to go to uni. We choose to be here.
In 1949, a group of boys no older than 18 left their rugby club at Northern Suburbs and decided to play the upcoming season under the moniker the Canberra Royals. It was a bold move led by a character named Jack Waters. Together, Jack and these boys had a point to prove in the Canberra rugby scene.
We all got together at Reed Park and we trained and everybody went to training. It was keen, it was a go-go.
It's a very strong family club. Like treat my old mate Bobby Brown over there like a brother. Yeah, might say that, a brother.
Well, we played together and we trained together and we drank together and it was great, no troubles.
There's a hell of a lot of rivalry though. You know, if you come from the south, you played on the north side, you play a lot bloody harder.
Australia had 7 million people and Canberra was a very small country town, about 40 or 50,000. Could have called it Fun City, the city that never slept, but I don't think so.
There were no licensed clubs in Canberra, so unless you knew a publican very well, the Albert Hall or a keg at someone's place, because there was nowhere else you could go.
The man who started the club, Jack Waters, rugby union was his whole passion. He never married, rugby union was his whole life. He used to go to games with binoculars around to look for good players and things like that. And all you have to do is read the old rugby newses, you can see his passion for the game that came through his writing. His right-hand man was Bill Hanley. Now, Bill Hanley was the nuts and bolt man. Royals would never have been the club they were without Bill, the only one who could talk Jack out of some of his sillier ideas.
The club built up numbers by recruiting public servants, school kids and rugby players of all sorts from near and far.
Started playing with Royals in 1963. Came across from Wagga, so I'd been told by a fellow called Ken McMullen, who was a Wallaby, when you go to Canberra, he said, I've heard that Royals is the side to play with. There were never truer words were said because Royals did have attitude.
The one that had the biggest influence on Royals in my day was Graham Hudson. He was the one that really put the steel into Royals. And he's the sort of fellow that when you're in the dressing room before a big game, you looked around, you saw Graham, you thought, yeah, we got Graham, we're right.
In 1954, the club's 6th ever season, Royals won its first ever first grade flag. In 1962, the club had its first ever Wallaby, flying centre Peter Scott.
My first grade game, Peter Scott was sort of the star player. So we started to go out of the door of the shed. Peter Scott's come out of having a spew in the toilet. And I said to one of the guys, I said, Scott, he's crook. He said, no, he's like that every week. So it fills you with confidence, though. Yeah.
We did benefit from having continuity of people. The 49ers, probably about half the team, were in one way or another, in say up to the mid-70s, still involved in one way or another with the club.
And there used to be a sign when Royals would play a grand final, it'd be at Manuka Oval, it'd be a great big banner, Robust Royals, so that probably told another story.
We won, 3 premierships in a row. Then we had a bad year because they were away with the countryside in New Zealand. And then he came back and won the grand final again. And after that grand final, Jack Waters went home and died in his sleep. A happy man.
Jack and his band of 49ers had laid a foundation that would be built upon over the coming decades. By 1968, Royals had secured 7 first-grade premierships. The next target was clear: junior rugby.
I started out in the under-12s.
I come through from an under-7.
And I was in the
third team for the under-9s, the Royals under-9 whites.
Now, in those days, we had 5 junior clubs. They were divided into a district arrangement.
Gulls Club in Yarralumla, Magpies Club in Hughes, Hawks Club in North Curtin, Falcons Club in South Tuggeranong and Warriors in Western Creek.
And that was pretty much unheard of, that one club would have 5 junior clubs. So we were getting the best of the, of the juniors, and they were outstanding players.
We spent a lot of effort in making sure we had good quality people running our junior teams. I think it was the basis on which Royals basically had all its success.
This junior program produced some of the best rugby players in Canberra and the country. Guys like Paul Southwell, and of course Royals' most decorated international, Michael O'Connor, who'd go on to represent Australia in both rugby union and rugby league. Now that Royals had a flow of talented juniors streaming through the senior grades year after year, the club was positioned to dominate senior rugby in Canberra.
And I think if you ask anybody that played through that middle 80s into the early 90s, the club was very competitive within itself for players striving for positions in each team. And if you were good enough to be in first grade, well done. Of course, there was a bloke behind you that was after your spot.
There was a period there in '88 where we only lost 3 grade games for the whole 2 seasons.
Nobody worked harder than us. Nobody trained harder than us. Nobody worked harder. So what right have these bastards got to beat us? They don't have no right to beat us.
Deadbeats go to deadbeat clubs, and that's where they end up. And they couldn't handle what Royals wanted to do.
Daley Thompson had the throwaway line when he was training on Christmas Day, and somebody said, "Why are you training on Christmas Day?" And he said, "Because the other people aren't training on Christmas Day." And that was the attitude, to some extent, that we took.
We were professional beyond our years, and we led the way. We are going to win, whatever it took. We're going to win. Usually it was within the rules.
Well, when John Kelsey first started coaching, a few people said, "Why don't you get Berkey along?" And I think everybody's view was rugby union players wouldn't be able to handle him.
I remember turning up for the first training that Berkey came to. It was about 38 degrees on a Tuesday night. We started with about 90 players for pre-season training. There was literally 15 guys at the end that Berkey called together to say, "Well done to you." He wouldn't speak to the rest of us.
To actually finish a session under Brian Burke, it was a badge of honour, really, and he was certainly a critical part of that success.
He was just a legend. I mean, we had guys who would hide and wait to see if Berkey was turned up for training. He had this little VW that he'd turn up with, and Berkey toured.
That was also another one of the innovations that the club had that put them ahead of everybody else, was that they would organise every second year a tour.
This club was just so different to anybody else. This wasn't just about rugby. It was the off-field as well.
I put together a songbook, and that when they got from town to town, they had the ability to sing songs and compete with the opposition in social functions. Part of that led to the development of the Royals Choir.
We sang and we performed in theatres and all around the place. That's the sort of stuff. This is the sort of club we were. We just wanted to be better than everybody else, and so people wanted to be a part of that.
Well, it's a culture which a lot of people from the outside don't understand, and they all sort of look at it and think, well, how do they keep doing it? But it's just that the people that have been here before me and who have followed me have continued to sort of develop that culture and ensure that that culture is maintained and upheld. And that's been, to me, has been part of what the success has been all about.
Led by the coaching prowess of David Scott, John Kelsey, Kim Thurban, Graham Reid and Dougal Whitten, the club made 44 grand finals across 4 grades in the 11-year period between 1984 and 94. A feat not replicated by any other sporting club, not back then and never since. Off the field, President Rex Clark steered the club out of the bar and into the boardroom. With such success both on and off the field, it's no wonder the club was getting attention on the national stage.
I think we had a conscious plan to bring the best coaches in the country, the national coaches, we could get them to Canberra. If you weren't from Sydney and later on Brisbane, you didn't get a look at. What we did was show them it's not who's best in Sydney or Brisbane, there's people in the ACT who are just as good.
I remember somebody asked us, one of the journos from Sydney, he said, "Oh, is this the first time the Royals have had 3 players, selected in the Wallabies?" I said, "Mate, this is the first time the ACT's ever had 3 players selected in the Wallabies." So it was a big thing for us. And Johnny Ross and Paul Cornish, the 3 of us made up on that Wallaby tour. The Wallabies, they had a nickname for us. They called us the Rot. It was Royals on tour, so we were the Rot.
After the Rot came more blue baggers turned Wallabies, the likes of Matthew Pinney and Matt O'Connor. All the while, trophies kept rolling through the front door of Royals' very own licensed club, going from strength to strength. As the junior clubs kept brimming with talent, the club found itself towing the line of rugby's next frontier.
The Royals women's team was the basis for ACT rugby. If there was no Royals women's team, I don't think it would have gone any further.
Early on, a majority of rugby people were sceptical. While the club always embraced the women, and I think, a credit to us that we did, there were always sceptics. The girls themselves were the people who said, no, we want to play rugby. And they found a coach and they found a competition to play in, and they never looked back.
We've won 18 grand finals within the Canberra competition, and I've been part of those. So I'm leaving a legacy, although I'm not going anywhere. I think that girls can see that through hard work and dedication that you can be part of something. And I've travelled the world. I've played 22 tests for my country, 4 World Cups. I've played over 100 games for the Brumbies. I've played over 200 games with Royals. And I guess for me, Royals is like home. I think if I never felt so welcome and part of something, then maybe years ago I would have stopped playing the game. But I'm still here.
Mark O'Brien, he's got one. He lost an arm in a motorbike accident. He used to be my wrestling partner at Royals at the training. And the first day we got packed down against each other and trying to push each other off a mark, he gave me the worst gravel rash with his bloody beard that I've ever come across. Every other training after that, he went home and shaved before he came to training. He was so beautiful. And Maura, his wife, "Why don't you shave in the morning anymore?" "Oh, I'm going to training and Helen doesn't like my beard." So it was pretty. And then Jeff Didier would shave and Jimmy Taylor would shave, and there was a few others, and it was so funny. No, I'm not wrestling you guys. You're way too big and way too strong. But yeah, it was good.
By the late 90s, the club had enjoyed the kind of success only a small portion of amateur sports teams in this country have experienced. To that point, the setbacks had really only been minor. That was about to change.
In 2003, we had a change of leadership at the club. I was elected as president, and there was a change over about half a dozen people. We thought we were taking on a reasonable club in a reasonable position. Just after Christmas, we learnt the Licence Club, who was our major sponsor, Royals Rugby Licence Club at Western Creek, had gone into receivership. That was a real drain on us. For any club to survive, you need money, and that was over $150,000 flow per year that disappeared overnight. So that was the real moment where we went, we're sort of in crisis mode here, we're in survivability mode. Was this club going to survive? I remember the club being that meeting place. When the club wasn't there, even though it was still there, it wasn't ours, we didn't have that connection with the club. So it was a little bit difficult at that time. The morale was low, and it was not an environment, a winning feel in a winning environment. Epitomised by our first grade getting beaten 100-0 in one game over the north side of Canberra. Royals always had this tough, hard footy, but guys that were tough and hard outside and had a bit of fun and drank and sang songs and all that sort of thing. I think a lot of it got lost a little bit. The club folding was not an option. We just had to find a way out. Through the sale of the licensed club to the Raiders Group, we were able to secure $200,000 per annum for 3 years. So we got our financial lifeline, we got a home base, and we also started to work on club culture of respect, inclusiveness across the board. When a number of us stepped down in about 2013, 2014, we believed we had built the club back up to a club that was really ready to launch into the future.
If winning was contagious in the 80s and 90s, then so was defeat in the years after the licensed club was lost. 24 years went by without a first-grade premiership. In those 24 years, the club made 8 first-grade grand finals, but fell short every time. Then 2015 rolls around. Royals make the first-grade grand final, the 9th attempt to break the drought.
Look, it was a funny game. No one mentioned 24 years too much. I'm sure people were thinking about it, but it was just a joy to be there.
We'd attacked quite well that day, so if we could get our hands on the ball, we were shot.
We were in front, I think, by a point with about 8 to go, something like that. We gave away a penalty and Christian Leofano kicked it.
We sort of had the ball and we worked our way up towards the posts, and Macca had a crack at a field goal, sort of shied away just to the right.
He's missed it.
It's wide!
It's wide.
38 seconds left on the clock.
Pedro juggled it on I think about the 10th phase. At that stage I thought we were shot, but only someone like Pedro could regather it. Then when BJ took it off 2 passes inside, those 2 previous players, I thought initially, I think he might have blown it when he stepped back in. And then I've never seen him that quick. It was like 15 metres out, we knew he had it.
They're going through Ben Johnson, he cuts back to the inside, and he's going to score. Royals have won their first grand final in 24 years.
Having guys like Dougal and Kels, to see how much it meant to them, for me that's what it's about, and that's what this club's about. You know, it really showed us how much they care about the club, and it gave us a sense of, I guess, how much we want to care for the club, you know, in years to come.
2015 was for everyone who kept the faith, kept putting in the hours just for the love of it. None more so than the longest serving president of 11 years, Brian Paul, ably assisted by Brendan Maher and Paul Maguire. The sheer amount of hours that go into keeping a rugby club afloat, let alone successful, is something that's never gone unnoticed at Canberra Royals.
The life members and the reasons for why we have life members is very broad. It's not about whether you are a representative player or how many grade games you've played. It's about your contribution to the club.
I think life membership is a great honour because they've had so many great players and great operators and great administrators come through the club. The club wouldn't exist without them. We do have a life members dinner every year now. It's evolved into a very important forum where things are discussed, questions are asked, advice given. And it is now a very powerful body, for advancing Royals in the future.
One particular life member, a 49er no less, and one of the club's best ever players, was the club patron from 1995 until he sadly passed away in 2018.
My memories of Hawkey, he's just such a happy fella every time I saw him. Didn't matter what was going on with him. He was at the footy, had a beer, had his steak sandwich, he was hooking into that. You talk about Royals and you talk about the people at Royals, like he's one of those people. But he was just such a great guy, and he always said he had all the time in the world to chat to anyone. So I think that's something I'll definitely remember him for.
Royals, blue and white. One blue eye, one white eye, and they're the only colours he knew.
On the other side of the same coin is not what the people have done for the club, but what the club has done for its people.
My father and brother and 2 flatmates were killed in a car accident, and I was actually contacted by Quinzo, Gary Quinlivan. Quinzo recognised that I needed some help. He invited me to come and join the Royals boys. Best decision I ever made. Not knowing anybody was a little bit daunting, but my best mates are now guys that I met and played rugby with back in the day.
I think my story's a little bit unique because I came here amidst a family tragedy. My brother passed away, and without really knowing anyone, I felt immediately welcomed. Probably even beyond that, I felt immediately important and immediately valued by the way the club as a whole got around me and my family. It was actually at my brother's funeral, actually. There were a really large amount of people that came from the club that didn't really know me that well, but just wanted to support me because I was part of their community and part of their family, really. So probably that moment, I actually made a commitment to myself at that time to win a grand final for the club, and to be a long-time member of Royals.
We had an Indigenous exchange program or development program. We had the international exchange program. That was with a number of different countries, Norway, Israel, Ireland, Canada, and that included players as well as development officers. Yeah, look, I think a number of different clubs in the ACT Rugby Union had some problems, sort of surviving. In the time that I was president, Norths went down. The programs that we had probably helped to keep us afloat. It was an initiative that turned out to be beneficial to all.
In 2019, 70 years after Jack Waters, Bill Hanley, and their bunch of boys pulled on the blue and the white for the very first time, it's easy to see what's changed. In rugby, in Canberra, and in Royals. But it's even easier to see what hasn't.
Royals has always had that camaraderie, so people haven't said you don't reinvent a culture. It's already there, and this club had gone through that, and they stuck tight.
I don't think there's much change, to be honest with you. I think what they're doing out there now is what we were doing.
Like Dougal and Kelson and that sort of stuff that are still contributing to the club. So it's the old mixing with the new. That's what keeps momentum. It's not something you reinvent.
One of the things was you listen to the stories, what happened before us. And they were wonderful. I love those stories. I hope they tell those stories about what came before them. I'm hoping I'm in a couple of them.
I would like to see us in, again, in finals in every grade. I think that's something that should be an aim for us to get back to. And I know it happened a long time ago, but I don't see why it can't happen again.
As you would tend to do, you look at number 3 jumper, look at the tight head prop, how he's going, and that number 3 jumper is in good hands. I'm really, really chuffed and almost teary. It's in good hands. There's some strong men out there now. I love it. I absolutely love it.
The club has come through some dark times and has really gotten its act together on the field. What we now need to do is put some bricks and mortar behind that. Having been here for 70 years in the community, I think we're at that stage now where we deserve to have something that we can show off and be proud of. Yeah, look, in 10 years' time, in 2029, I'd like to be having a beer on the top deck of our club rooms, overlooking the field after a grand final win. I'll probably have to be yelling in Dougal's ear because he'll be too old to hear me. I'll be having a beer with Buddha and TT and Kels and all those boys. Yeah, only good things ahead.
Jack, Bill and their band of 49ers could never have guessed what the club would one day become. As generation after generation take the royal reins and pass them on, it's pride and commitment that will see this club thrive for the next 70 years and beyond. Proud to be Royals.